Right, the second talk that I have, and where I just made some last-minute changes, which you should never do, is about risks. First, a definition. Risk is a chance that an unwanted situation arises which has serious consequences. And it's often expressed as a probability of occurrence of the situation and the damage that arises as a result of the occurrence. I'm going to show you a number of examples, as many examples as the time allows. And we're going to have first a vote of each of these scenarios. How realistic is it? Is there actually a risk involved? And then we will have a discussion. So here we have the first one. Stakeholders are completely passive during formative usability tests in the early design phase. Usability test sessions are dutifully observed, but the stakeholders' body language shows that they're bored to hell. The 200-page report arrives much too late and leads to no personal engagement in the product team. As a result, only minor details are changed and no one cares about meeting user needs. So I ask for your assessment of this scenario. It could be rubbish. You could say it sounds reasonable, and you could say, yes, exactly this has happened to me. So your vote, please. And in this case, there are no right and wrong answers, so so it's all going to be green. Aha, okay. So this seems to strike a chord with some people. So here's the scenario again. What would you do to prevent this risk? Because that's essentially what it's about. We can't just say, yeah, there's a risk, too bad about that, let's move on. We have to do something to counter this risk. What would you do? Are there any suggestions? Scenario is summarized up here. So those of you who have had passive stakeholders during usability tests, what do you do? Yes, lady over there.
Rather than preparing a 200-page report, we would just get together after each session and discuss the usability things that we'd noticed, and usually kind of decide what the top 3 things were for that participant.
Yes. So that's number 1. Death to 200-page usability reports. That's not usable, and that's not a good example of our profession. We should set a good example in the work we're doing. So that's number 1. Right. Anything else?
Maybe run shorter ones, but more regularly.
What?
Run shorter sessions, but on a more regular basis. So okay. Steve Crew recommends doing one morning a month.
Yes, okay. Possibly. Yes?
Share the key findings through like PowerPoint and support it with the recordings of the sessions so they can actually see the recordings when the users were facing the problems.
Right. Why do you think they're bored? It's not relevant. It's not their baby. So your task as a usability professional is certainly to make sure that it becomes their baby. How would you do that? Yes, in the back, lady in the back.
Maybe get them to have a go at it and get them to, if there's a particular area of it that would be relevant, or get them to make a change or suggest some stuff.
Okay. Well, I would probably, yes.
I think sometimes it's about doing it collectively, and especially before the session, to agree upon what things needs to be tested, so they have a sense of opinion or a say on the results.
Exactly. Involve them in the planning, or at least offer them the option of being involved in the planning of the usability test. So here are my humble suggestions. Involve the team in the test. Make it their baby. Ask them to observe. That's okay. They will be bored. But ask them to take notes. Discuss after each session. There's a method that's called the KJ method, or affinity diagram, which is absolutely excellent for involving stakeholders in the decision-making process of what should be in the usability test report. It's described in detail in the CPUX UT curriculum. So go down there, it's freely available. You can say there, essentially it's a voting process about the most important problems. Involve the teams in the creation of the usability test script. Who are the typical users? What should the test tasks be like? You, as a UX professional, still have a kind of a veto right to say, no, that's a leading question, we can't ask that. Provide a useful and usable explanation of what usability testing is. Like Steve Crook says, it's not rocket science. It can be explained in about 15 minutes. So that's what I would do to counter this risk. Here's the next one. You conduct a usability test and you find no problems at all. The client asks, and I think that's entirely reasonable, what he gets for his £5,000. Now, I don't know what the going rate is, and that's not part of it. But what do you think of that scenario? All right, let's say what the jury says about this one. Ah, that's what I thought. Haha, that's what I hoped for. The majority says this is rubbish. Well, I must admit, this has never happened to me, but it has been close on one occasion. But there's an important information missing in the scenario. What is that? I would not, as the scenario is presented there, I would refuse to answer it, which is essentially an option that is missing, or you could say that is that one, so you might actually get away with that. What information is missing in the scenario?
Improvement, so there might not be a problem, but doesn't mean you can't make it better.
Well,
What stage the test was done at? It might be after many of them.
What was the initial expectation of the time?
did they find anything at all? Maybe the report is full of substantial positive findings. And in that case, I would say the client has got value for his £5,000. It works great. That is, of course, a message that we as responsible usability professionals must be willing to communicate. So that's what I've summarized here. It's not very well known, but the UXPA has a code of conduct. And that code of conduct, for instance, says UX practitioners shall accurately report both the positive and negative feedback from UX activities. If there are no findings at all, then the moderator may need training and certification. If there are many substantial positive findings, then I would say that it is not a risk, but an opportunity. A positive thing, a very positive thing, to say to the team, you've done an excellent job. Maybe you can cut down on usability activities because you seem somehow to do your job very well. So maybe we can make more use of inspection, discount testing, no costly observation of usability test sessions. That's one of my favorites, by the way. That's the enormous amount of money or time that is used in many companies to observe usability tests. I admit it is necessary in many cases. But the analogy that I often use is if you go with your car to a repair shop Do you insist on having a one-way mirror where you can observe what they do to your car? Probably not. Right, next scenario. The day before the test, the prototype is full of lorem ipsum and inconsistent data. When you politely ask about this, the developers bite your head off. What do you think of that scenario? Good. Let's see. Okay. Well, I'm very glad to see that there are 43% in this audience who have not had this happen to them. That's good. Perhaps you could offer some advice on how you avoid this situation. Excuse me?
Make your own prototype.
Well, that is certainly that's certainly something I have done on a few occasions. Make the prototype yourself. That's good advice. It's not in my official advice in just a moment, because in many cases it's just impossible. But it is certainly a good idea. Then you've only got yourself to blame. And that helps a lot. Any other suggestions? Yes?
Maybe you do want a bit of inconsistency to see if the users are paying attention.
Oh, okay. So testing the users, the suggestion is that maybe we do want a bit of inconsistency to see if the users actually pay attention. I don't think I would recommend that. Any other suggestions? Yes?
Maybe if you involve all your stakeholders in the process, you wouldn't actually be designing products with lorem ipsum, but you would have at least copy, which is things which the user would probably want to read because they understand who the personas are.
Okay. Well, the point is that it's okay to have lorem ipsum for a start, but whenever you show something to users, I would definitely recommend that you replace the lorem ipsum by text that makes sense. Right. So here are my suggestions. Constant care. Do not just show interest in the prototype 24 hours before the usability test. Start showing polite interest in it at least 14 days before. And then show up every day and ask the developers very politely, how's the baby doing? They will notice, initially they will bite your head off, but heads grow again. Test with a hybrid prototype, a mixture of paper prototypes and live screens. Offer help to create the paper prototypes. That's essentially along the same line as you did. Let's do some repairs in their prototype. If the usability test is really important and if they're engaged, consider saying, okay, we'll wait 1 or 2 days. It's going to cost me a lot of trouble because I have to reschedule the test participants. My experience is that engaged developers can do miracles within 24 hours. Yes?
What about running a pilot session the day before and bring them?
Also a good idea to show them the day of the real test is approaching. That's a very good idea. I don't have it on the slide, but that's a good idea. To show in 2 days. Now, it's probably okay to have a lorem ipsum prototype for the pilot test, but would you like to show that to the users in 2 days? Probably not. Very good point. Thank you. Next one, committed to usability. I can almost hear the boss say it. The CEO has announced that the company is committed to usability. A few months later, a usability test unquestionably finds at least 6 critical usability problems in the company's flagship product. It will take 4 to 6 weeks to correct the problems. The CEO announces that the product will ship anyway. I struck a chord with that one. I'm glad to hear that. What can you do to prevent this? Excuse me?
Test early.
Test early? Okay. Yes?
Relate the critical, the critical usability findings to a potential cost impact to sales and conversions, etc.
Okay. Yes. So you mean quantify the results and translate them, speak the CEO's language, translate the usability test results into, yes, exactly. The gentleman was doing like this. Yeah, this is a language that CEOs understand. Yes? These are good ideas. Yes, another one.
Isn't this like the cause of a lack of empathy towards our users if the CEO doesn't know really what the users want? So getting them to actually use the product internally before it goes live might be.
It's slightly more complicated than that because the CEO often has other considerations than usability. I think the danger here is that he has said, or she has said, we are committed to usability without thinking too much about the impact it has in the organization or amongst certain people in the organization. Did you have something to add?
Well, involving them would be great, but at that level it's quite hard.
Yes.
But related to what you said about cost, explaining the risk of actually shipping the product too early. If it's too early and it's not right, it alienates customers. Explaining what the risk is of actually doing what he's trying to do, or she's trying to do.
Here are my suggestions. Educate management that true commitment is not free. Commitment could be an expensive word. Have patience. It takes time to change the course of a supertanker. That's easy said, but this time is measured in years, and we must realize that as UX professionals. And we must be ready to admit a few defeats along the way, or to accept a few defeats along the way. In my view, the real test of the company's commitment to usability comes when you ask for the changes to be made and released in a new product version 2 months later. That's when the real test of the CEO's commitment to usability shows up. If he or she just says, well, the product has shipped now, let's move on to the next product, then you might want to start talking to some of the nice people from Moo who are out here to recruit people. Any comments on that? Yes, lady in the back.
Would it also be good to maybe find a middle ground? So if there's a reason why the product has to ship, if there's other deadlines, or if there's a financial thing aside from usability, to say these are the things that we have to fix and we can do it in the time frame. Also to find that compromise, because like you say, a lot of people wouldn't understand the value of UX, but there are also other constraints.
Yes. So yeah, essentially, if I understand you right, you're saying the CEO should justify his decision in a way that's understandable to everyone, not just say, we will ship according to plan, full stop. And anyone who disagrees commits mutiny. Yes, next one. The whole team is in the observation room. Anticipation is running high. Unfortunately, the test participants failed to show up. Now we're getting down to earth. This is rather different from the previous one with the CEO. This is a more technical one. All right, let's have a look at that one. Yes, good. Fortunately, we know a little bit about how to prevent this problem. Does anyone have any good suggestions for critical usability tests? Yes.
We always try and get backup participants.
Yes, backup. That's right. Technically, it's sometimes called a floater. That is, for a critical usability test, you recruit 2 people. One is a real test participant. The other one is asked to bring a good book or their iPad and tell them that maybe you won't be needed. We will pay you very well for just showing up. So that's one way of doing it. essentially taking out an insurance, you might say.
When we can, we go to the user because they're less likely to drop out that way.
Right, yeah. That's an expensive way, especially if the team wants to observe the usability test. But that is certainly going to the user, doing the test at the user's place. Then they will have to do quite an active effort not to escape from the usability test. Here's some of the advice that I can come with. Study the free CVX UT curriculum. There's a special section on recruitment of test participants. Those of you who have had this problem are certainly not the only ones. And clever people have put some thought into how you can avoid this problem. Recruit a floater, or what did you call it, a backup person. Show personal interest in test participants. Get their mobile phone number, call them 24 hours before the test, and say something like that. Your participation is really important to us. You have to say it with a bit of feeling, of course, but that works. And of course, provide a decent incentive. So they're not skipping you because the only thing they get is a mug that says, a coffee mug that says, I survived a usability test. That's the final one. That's not a scenario. That's a moment. That's a moment of truth for me. These two talks, my talk about heuristic evaluation and this one, were worth your time. And it's totally anonymous. I don't know who you are, so we must get used to being measured. Of course, you don't know if I can cheat with the software and so on. All right. So here's a summary of what I have. I have to thank some people, Bernard Rummel from SAP, Henning Brau from Bosch, and my American friend Chauncey Wilson for input to this one. Some of you have been taking photographs. You're very welcome to do that. But I'll be happy to send you copies of my slide if you send me an email. You will have, there's a slight threshold that you will have to step over. You will have to find my email address. Send me a request for the slides. I'll be happy to send them to you. There are a few bonus slides that I haven't shown. And of course, you will have you can increase your chances of getting the slides in two ways. Number one is by using the word please in the subject field. And number two is by including at the same time answers to these 6 wonderful U-test questions. Okay.
Okay, can we thank Rolf, please?
Thank you.